review of Raw for Monday night on USA Now on the John and Wei Take the Mic.
It's Review of Raw. I am John Pollock alongside Wei Ting. And coming out of WrestleMania, Wei, it was the new era. Now we're into the newer era.
Sure. Yeah, the newest era.
Okay, that's what they were telling me for 3 hours tonight. It is the new era, and I thought we were part of the new era. I guess I was wrong.
This show definitely felt like it was more of a changing of eras, though, than the previous one, I would say.
I've got to say, Wei, between Battleground and Raw, if I was an average fan, I'd be done this week. I would have gotten everything I could have possibly wanted out of WWE in 2 nights.
You got a lot of good stuff.
You got,
over
I would argue, Monday's Raw. If that had been on the pay-per-view, some of those matches, I would have said that's a pretty entertaining pay-per-view. I would have been good with that as a pay-per-view, and I got that on Monday night. So SmackDown, I'm not saying that no one's watching this thing, but I just feel that for people with a life, it's going to be tough to stretch it out for 3 straight nights, Wei.
I beg to differ. I think they've been delivering really good content over the past 2 days, and I think it'll only generate more interest for what SmackDown might have to offer. I feel like, sure, it's a lot of stuff, but it's all good stuff. So I feel like there's going to be at least a lot of curiosity watching SmackDown tomorrow.
There will be this week. I'm just saying for weeks from now, when you look at this roster on Raw, it's a great roster. Mm-hmm. And we got an excellent Raw on Monday night. You're not going to get this every week, but what we are going to get every single week, Wei, is the new theme song for Raw. As I was so curious as to who they would choose, and stupid me. I mean, it's one of 4 bands, of course, in Kevin Dunn's playlist. Shine Down.
Oh, is that what that is?
The song Enemies is our new theme song. So tonight is no longer the night. It is now Enemies by Shine Down.
We basically saw a lot of graphical changes, a brand new, rebranding of Raw, which I didn't necessarily expect. I knew we were going to get something different for SmackDown, but I thought Raw would stay the same. So I was pleasantly surprised when we saw this new opening.
What did you think about the aesthetic changes?
They have a new logo. They changed the broadcast area over from the ringside portion.
Where the Raw set was for the last brand split.
Yes, and we're, Nitro used to have it, that whole thing. And, it's a small change, but I feel like it's welcome. They didn't really go as far as to change the cameras or anything like that, but I think a small change like that helps signify that there's something different.
They seem to play with the jib camera a lot more. Maybe I just was noticing on this show. Sure. In particular, the 4-way, they did like this great aerial jib shot over the 4 guys as they were getting ready to square off. So it felt like they were tinkering with certain stuff.
Definitely. It wasn't a huge amount of change, but I think they changed enough to let you know that this was going to be different. The logo, this
thing has been criticized heavily, Wei. I don't really give it. I didn't put much thought into the logo.
I don't mind it. I kind of like it. It looks, a bit more minimal and I'd say modern, and it's going to be one of those.
It looks
things.
like Mick Foley designed it.
I don't know about that. I don't know how well Mick Foley's Photoshop skills are, but I feel I like it. I think it's
Foley
a bit of
shop skills.
It's a bit of a departure from kind of the previous, I'd say 10 years of 15 years of Raw logos, and kind of reminds me of more of the 96 logo. But it's one of those things that we'll all get used to. Like, remember how many people criticize the belt? Now I think we're all pretty okay with it.
Our new announced team on Raw, as we talked about last week, Michael Cole, Byron Saxton, and Corey Graves, who I thought did a very good job on night 1. Yeah. I didn't sense any differences from him doing 1 hour of NXT versus 3+ hours of Raw. I thought he fit in really nicely with these two.
Immediately felt comfortable. And I'll say I feel like Graves even seemed to reinvigorate the other two. I certainly feel like his addition to the team somehow gives Byron a larger voice and maybe a more distinguished voice. You have Graves kind of playing more. He didn't necessarily play full-on heel today, but he kind of had.
He had his moments.
He had that edge to him, and it kind of makes Byron, a bit more of a defined babyface color commentator. And I think Cole did a good job on the show too.
Well, Byron, you say, found his voice. Cole lost his voice on the show.
What point?
In the literal sense, his voice was dying on him near the end there.
Oh, okay, they were even towards the end.
They were even calling him out on it. So, yes, they're in the old position away from ringside. And then as we're seeing the three announcers, then they just shot past them into Mick Foley and Stephanie McMahon, who are already in the ring, and welcome us to the new era of Raw. And Foley brings out the entire roster, and there are quite a lot of them, Way. We were joking about this on Sunday night. They had the locker rooms. So for the Raw locker room, the camera would pan across to show everyone. On the SmackDown locker room, it was just a static shot, and then they zoomed in on Cena, and it was just a very different numbers game when it came to the Raw and SmackDown rosters. Stephanie says how Foley is in full control, and then goes over the main event from Battleground and blames Roman Reigns for losing the title for all of us. His actions have hurt the company.
Yeah, man. Really, from last night to tonight, you can really see
they lost faith in him.
How much they are no longer protecting Roman Reigns.
He's out of the main event of SummerSlam.
Yeah.
We will get into that.
And this sort of public shaming of his character. Yes, it was Stephanie kind of doing it almost, in a way to babyface Roman, but
it didn't.
I think there was the
Stephanie was the default babyface because she was saying what the audience felt.
Totally, I felt like the other motive was to really just kind of shame Roman Reigns publicly, and we saw that.
He had a rough evening in that regard, and the fans demand a champion, Stephanie says, and Foley announces that tonight we will have 2 fatal 4-way matches. The winners then meet, and the winner of that match tonight goes on to face Seth Rollins at SummerSlam for the new championship title. And they will be competing in a championship for the fans, the WWE Universal Championship, which I found hysterical that we have the name of a championship that now dwarfs the world championship, the universe.
Oh, you know what? I think 99% of fans will probably hate the name of this new championship. I love it, man. I feel like, first off the bat, you need something to make this title seem bigger than the one with the actual real lineage. And what's bigger than the world? Space. The Universal Championship. I think it sounds so ridiculous that it's just perfect for the playfulness of professional wrestling. I wouldn't want the UFC, to have a UFC bantamweight Universal Champion. That sounds a little ridiculous. But for pro wrestling, I think it kind of captures the playfulness and kind of colorfulness of pro wrestling. And like Universal Championship, it makes it sound like it's like the Infinity Gauntlet. You know what I mean? It sounds like it's a cosmic, powerful object that I actually quite like.
This reminded me of when China was at her popularity peak, and then WCW introduced Asia.
Oh yes, because Asia is bigger.
Yes. Yeah. So they announced that the 8 participants in the Fatal 4-Ways will be Sami Zayn, Sheamus, Chris Jericho, Cesaro, Roman Reigns, who was booed tremendously, Rusev, Kevin Owens, and Finn Balor, who was celebrating his 35th birthday on Raw tonight.
They didn't mention 35, did they?
They didn't mention the age, and I don't think that was an accident. I don't think they want to be revealing, because I think most people associate Finn Balor as being a lot younger than he is.
He's presented as a rookie.
Yep. Stephanie notes that the women's title is also still on Raw, so says that Charlotte tonight will defend the title against Sasha Banks tonight. Now it's your chance to be seen and heard on Review a Raw. Simply cut a promo in 30 seconds or less and send the video link to Outlaw Radio. If we choose your promo, then you will be the winner of a t-shirt from Pro Wrestling Tees. Tune in each and every week here on Review a Raw. So a lot announced at the start of the show to drive the viewer to stay around. And we started off with our first 4-way. Cesaro, Rusev, Kevin Owens, and Finn Balor. Cole goes over all of Finn Balor's New Japan credentials. Sure, Cole is all up to date on the G1 and the latest.
Yes. They're really not shying away at all from New Japan mentions. I mean, really, at times, WWE sometimes feels like a commercial for New Japan straight up now.
So there was a lot to this match. They went 20 minutes here for the first match on Raw. Cesaro hit a somersault dive off the apron to Rusev on the floor. They went through the first commercial break. Rusev and Owens then worked together, and Owens was coaching Rusev, telling him to do that flip as he would come and hit a somersault splash onto him. Then eventually they got into it. Cesaro returned with a double cross body off the top, hits uppercuts to all three in separate corners, and then hip tosses Rusev to the floor. Then all three were on the floor with Finn Balor in the ring, and he hit a Tope Con Hero and went through a second commercial break. There was a Tower of Doom spot with Rusev tossing everybody. Owens hit a frog splash to Balor. Rusev broke that up. They went through a number of different pinning combinations with saves. Cesaro and Balor were on the floor. Rusev applied the accolade to Owens, and Cesaro came in, deadlifted Rusev into a vertical suplex, and then Rusev leaned back on the accolade to Cesaro, who flipped over for a 2 count. And then the finish saw Owens super kicking Cesaro after a break of the sharpshooter that Cesaro had applied to Rusev. Balor hit the running drop kick to Owens, a sling blade, drop kicked Rusev, and then hit the coup de grace to Rusev, and he pinned Rusev, and Finn Balor advances to the, I guess, finals tonight of the 4-way contestants.
Yeah, I think initially upon the announcement of this match, you can really question whether or not a 4-way featuring, 3 of your other high mid-card guys is really the best way to debut Finn Balor. Perhaps a squash match of some kind might have served him better, but to have him go over these other 3 high mid-card guys, I feel you immediately off the bat at the beginning of the show know where he's positioned on the roster. And I thought it was a good debut for him.
Yeah, I would have questioned this if he had lost this, even if he hadn't taken the fall. So watching this, I really thought that on the first night, they're not going to have him lose his first match, and he would at least get to the finals.
You could tell also, during his entrance, you could tell that a lot of people in this WWE crowd had probably heard of Finn Balor, but maybe weren't necessarily, weekly NXT viewers. And so we're so used to seeing in Full Sail everybody doing the Balor entrance. But here, I'd say off the top, it was more so like, it seemed like maybe like, I'd say a good 50 to 60%. A lot of people still seem like they weren't all that familiar with him. But certainly, I suppose that was the goal of this show, is to introduce Finn Balor.
They plugged a New Day celebration for later tonight to commemorate their tag title reign and their new cereal, as well as coming up next, the debut of Nia Jax. There was a montage of the various Cruiserweight Classic competitors, and at the end said, "Coming to Raw." And Wei, I have to ask you, before the end of 2016, will we see on a Raw telecast Ho Ho Lun?
On a Raw telecast? I don't know if you noticed, but he was...
He was in this package.
Yes, but he was also backstage at the Performance Center during the draft interviews last week. So
he's getting ready.
I mean, I don't doubt that they'd seriously consider hiring this guy, considering, their goal to expand into China.
What a story that will be.
Yeah.
The announcers had this lame discussion amongst them about the fact that SmackDown had the higher ratings last week, and then Graves explaining that, well, it was because the draft was last week featuring all of the Raw talent. I understand we want to give this illusion of competition, but this came off so painfully forced. Nia Jax took on Britt Baker, and Baker was placed in the Tree of Woe. You might recognize Britt Baker. She was on Breaking Ground during the last season, briefly.
Is she signed or just a local talent?
I believe just a local talent. I don't think she has a deal.
Yeah. This was the other kind of, I'd say, fresh thing about this episode of Raw, the return of squash matches.
Yes, we saw a few of them in this. Oh, and one of the all-time great job guys in history.
Yeah.
Coming up later. Jax ran into her with a reverse splash, leg drop, but then lifted Baker up and then did another leg drop, getting the win in 1 minute and 19 seconds. So that was all for Britt Baker, who, if she does have a deal, maybe we will see her again, but not for the foreseeable future.
Not that it really matters, but I like the idea of them, especially pushing their monsters with jobbers. And, Nia Jax, we got kind of our first taste of her on the main roster. Her entrance is a bit more interesting. They kind of like do it a bit differently from your typical wrestler. They have like these close-ups on her eyes. They have the Andre shot from the side.
Yes,
and
because she's not like most girls.
I mean, that's sort of the intent. I mean, I'd say presentation-wise it was effective, but once she got in ring, compared to the level that the women are at today, I'd say she's very much exposed and clearly, in my opinion, not ready for the main roster. However, I mean, I do think if you want to push her on the main roster, the best way is to have her squash a bunch of these random women. Do that for 10 weeks, and I think you could probably build to a good match with Sasha.
Catch all of our podcasts daily up at FightNetwork.com. You can also subscribe to Live Audio Wrestling on iTunes and listen through the free Stitcher app. Well, someone at the WWE heard about Pokemon Go, so it's officially run its course, in my estimation, in pop culture, because the WWE has acknowledged it. The Golden Truth spent all night searching for Pokemon. They went up to Sasha Banks, and then they run off searching for them on R-Truth's phone. Tom Phillips then interviews Banks and asks if she is feeling the pressure tonight, and she says she thrives on pressure and is going to make her dream come true tonight, and it's about to get lit.
I'd say Pokemon Go might have jumped the shark with in terms of popularity. I would say the term "it's about to get lit" might have jumped the shark too, because it was also uttered on WWE TV.
A number of boxes you could check off on tonight's list. Brock Lesnar will be on Raw next week in Atlanta, which is interesting because Saturday's UFC pay-per-view is in Atlanta in the same arena.
Interesting.
So Brock will be there 2 days later.
I doubt he will.
Oh, he probably won't be getting in 2 days early to go take in 201, would be my guess. But he will be back next week. And it's going to be interesting how they build up this feud because you have the two guys on opposite brands at this point. And the big question next week, will Brock be by himself or will Paul Heyman be with him?
Great question.
Because Paul Heyman, his contract has expired and they're in the midst of trying to work out a new deal. And we'll see if we see him next week or not.
Do you expect Brock to make any mention or reference to his drug failure?
I don't think it'll be a big part. I could see some subtle line in there in response to Randy Orton's comment, but not really. No, I don't think so. Chris Jericho, Sheamus, Sami Zayn, and Roman Reigns was our next four-way, and they ganged up on Reigns at the start. There was a sign in the crowd that was just heartwarming. It said, "We're spending our 34th anniversary at Raw." Great choice. They referred numerous times on this show to Zayn and Owens and their match of the year contender from Sunday night.
Really good.
Zayn teased a dive early on and then did a backflip off the top rope, and Reigns attacked him from behind. They went back and forth, and it led to Reigns going over the top rope to the floor. Jericho then hit a springboard dropkick, sending Sheamus off the apron, and then Reigns clotheslined Jericho and Zayn and finished with a tope to all three men on the floor. We went to the commercial break, and this is where they announced a number of Ontario dates for NXT. They're going to be running the former Maple Leaf Gardens on September 22nd, which is a Thursday, St. Catharines on the 23rd, and Kitchener on September 24th.
Oh my God.
So that's where Ring of Honor has run a number of their, the downtown shows when they don't run Ted Reeve Arena. After the break, Jericho and Sheamus are working over Reigns on the floor. Makes a comeback. He hits a drive-by to both Jericho and Sheamus from the floor. And then he's clotheslining Sheamus in the corner. Jericho runs into Sheamus, so he's giving clotheslines to both of them. Zayn hit the Blue Thunder Bomb to Reigns for a 2 count. And then Reigns lifted up Zayn and went for this razor's edge into a sit-out power bomb and got a 2 count off of that.
Splash Mountain.
Yes, which he also did at the pay-per-view on Sunday night. So I guess
it's his new move.
He has introduced that into his repertoire. Sheamus goes for the white noise, and Reigns stops him with a Superman punch, hits Jericho with one. There's another to Sheamus, and then Zayn rolls him up for a 2 count, and then a Superman punch is delivered to Zayn. Reigns blocks a codebreaker, hits another Superman punch. The spear gets stopped with a kick, and Jericho hits the codebreaker, getting a near fall. And then Jericho mocked his pose, ran at Reigns, who leapfrogged, speared Jericho, and pinned him as Cole yelled, "Vindication." Which would not be the word I would associate with Roman Reigns after tonight's show.
It's been really interesting to see how they've been booking Roman and how the crowd's been reacting to him last night and on Raw, on this episode of Raw, because he's getting booed everywhere everything he's doing. And it's not like the company is necessarily pushing him as a sole babyface. They are kind of pushing him as a heel by pairing him with other stronger baby faces. And you saw a lot of that in this match with Reigns being paired with Sami Zayn, who I think coming off the momentum of the match at Battleground is maybe, my favorite baby face on the roster, on the Raw roster right now. Somebody who I think has the potential to reach Daniel Bryan levels of, crowd crowd relatability. And so you saw some of the chemistry that somebody like Roman had with somebody on the level of Sami Zayn, and I thought it was electric. I thought it was, here's a guy who people genuinely hated and who, cheated or at least, did something immoral and got caught for it. And then here you have somebody like a Sami Zayn who wasn't given all the chances that Roman Reigns was, and instead had to kind of really struggle for all those years to kind of even get to this spot and to gain some recognition. So I'd love to see Sami Zayn take on a bigger role following, last night, the match at Battleground. And I'd love to see a feud with Sami Zayn and Roman Reigns, with Zayn as a babyface and Reigns as a heel.
New Day comes out, and they're celebrating their 337 days as tag champions. They have balloons with the numbers, and they talk about how the world has changed since they won the tag titles. Jennifer Garner and Gwen Stefani were still married. Bootios was just a dream.
Not to each other, though.
No, not to each other. And then they threw to a video package on themselves, and we saw highlights of them winning the titles at SummerSlam last year, interacting with The Rock, Edge, Christian, Steve Austin, the Time Machine segment, which was a wonderful reminder of that classic segment. And then it ends with a huge chant of New Day rocks. They told a bunch of big package jokes. And then they're going to pick a fan to be an honorary member of the New Day tonight. And they pick a guy in the front row wearing their T-shirt, and he struggles over the barricade and gets into the ring. And he is called Sonny Boy by Kofi. And then
Big E was like, "What's your name, Sonny Boy?"
And he said, "Sonny Boy." And this went for approximately 25 minutes, where we learned his name was Sonny Boy.
I was expecting a bigger punchline at the end of this. We didn't really get it. I mean, I thought the concept was cute, though. No?
Maybe. I don't know. Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows turned babyface in my mind because they interacted here and stopped this segment from continuing and attacked everyone, hit a magic killer to Big E. This was awesome because there was a guy in the crowd all night who had a sign that read, "Big E, please stop diving." Yeah. They also tear the shirts off of Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, and Corey said he was glad they showed up because he was bored to death. And they got into Sonny Boy's face, and Gallows blew his nose into the shirt and threw it at Sonny Boy.
Mm-hmm. I thought this segment was, had some potential. You'll probably disagree, but I thought this segment had potential with the whole Sonny Boy thing. I thought it had even more potential with Gallows and Anderson doing something a lot more dastardly and evil than simply blowing into a shirt and tossing it. I thought they were going to attack Sonny Boy. I thought that was the whole setup, was them, magic killer on this innocent fan who you probably would have cheered.
The forecast would not have been great for Sonny Boy.
But, by the end of it, it was just kind of like, okay, they came out, interrupted, and didn't really do all that much. So this seems to be the new program. But
if they had given a magic killer to Sonny Boy, it would have been awesome.
It wouldn't have been great. I thought that's what they were leading up to.
You can check out the Law's YouTube channel at youtube.com/liveaudiowrestling. Subscribe for all of your free videos, including Ask Away, interviews, and much more. Then they announced, they had a lot of things to announce during breaks and stuff tonight. In 2 weeks from now, Dean Ambrose will be on the Stone Cold podcast following Raw on August the 8th.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's following Raw. This guy is going to have to fly and be at Raw that night for no reason other than to do the podcast.
True.
Why couldn't you just do this on the Tuesday?
Are they touring in pretty far towns separately, the two brands?
I don't know where they are that particular week. Right. This week it's Buffalo and Pittsburgh.
I would say probably Monday after Raw is still kind of your prime real estate for, getting people to watch. Maybe Austin doesn't do SmackDown.
I guess not. A Tuesday is just too problematic scheduling-wise. JoJo introduced Curtis Axel as Mr. Irrelevant because he was the last draft pick, and we got no follow-up on Heath Slater on this show.
I guess he actually was not drafted.
I guess not. Maybe he's just disappeared into the ether. So Axel says they saved the best for last when they drafted him. And then we had the return of Neville in his first match since March, and Cole pointed out that it was in this very building that he broke his ankle. Mm-hmm. And Neville was very concerned that the crowd would not remember him, and had moved on past him, which they kind of did in this match.
Yeah.
This was really dead.
Yeah, I felt bad for the guy. They did kind of forget him. And I'll say, like, I don't...
And this is a pretty terrible setup for a return.
And this was a good crowd. You know, they were hot for a lot of things, but I feel like they kind of dropped the ball with Neville, not necessarily promoting his return, not really kind of doing any type of video package. I think the significance of him injuring himself in the same building has, like, a great poetry to it that they didn't really capitalize on.
I mean, credit to Cole for getting the line in there. It added something, but yeah, this was the epitome of lost in the shuffle is Neville. I almost would have waited a few weeks to bring him back unless you just have him figured into SummerSlam and want him back on. But it was just, there was nothing. And you had weeks that you could have been at least promoting his return or something. It was just, with everything that's going on, Neville's return was such an afterthought, and especially on this show, of all things. I mean, this could have happened next week, too.
Yeah. So, it tells me that he'll probably basically have to kind of start from the bottom again, Neville. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing because the guy...
not at the bottom. He's above Mr. Irrelevant, we learned in the rankings.
Sure. The guy had a, okay run initially, but I feel like he could have been a lot more, and maybe this time he can, do it the right way.
He hit a standing shooting star onto the back of Axel. Axel got the advantage briefly, grabbed his ankle, but then got kicked by Neville. Crowd was just dead for this. There was a deadlift German, set him up in the corner, and hit the red arrow, and won the match in 3:42.
I think a big part of what's lacking with him is just they haven't really showcased any personality from the guy. I feel like he could probably do really well in the cruiserweight division as sort of a known dominant, maybe perhaps the champion initially. If they want to try to get him into that mid-card, upper mid-card, they're going to have to do some character work, I think.
Bob Backlund's with Darren Young in the locker room. Backlund's face looked all messed up. Maybe Maurice really laid in that slap. No, he looked like cut and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Did you watch this Darren Young Miz debacle?
Yeah.
And what did you think about this?
The Maurice match from like several weeks back on Raw was the same thing. I don't know if they simply mistimed.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, I don't know if they simply mistimed those fake injury spots or what, but they just always end up really confusing and terrible.
Yeah, for the two characters whose gimmick is their acting.
Yeah. Well,
maybe this is part of it. They're awful actors. Yeah. Anyway, that feud looks to be done after the non-resolution to it on Sunday. Okay. Lots of complaints. Backlund says they're going to learn from that match, and they are going to get that title. So Bob's just, he doesn't understand the brand split.
Yeah.
The Golden Truth walk in. They found a Pokemon, but Backlund yells at them and says Darren has to go out there and get the title. So this was just an excuse for Bob Backlund to scream like a maniac.
Well, I'll say at least like Young and Backlund kind of have a routine now. Like they're just kind of doing things until Backlund gets a reason to yell and go nuts. It's more than what they had.
There was a video package on Finn Balor, and then Tom Phillips interviewed Charlotte and Dana Brooke backstage. And Charlotte said that Banks had a partner last night, but tonight she's all alone. And the mic was cutting in and out here during this interview. And she says that she has evolved the women's division, and Banks will now bow down to the queen, and you can bank on that. And that took us to Charlotte and Sasha Banks, a match that was so big it was presented by Mountain Dew.
Wow.
And we got a video of WrestleMania 24 with Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels with Charlotte in the crowd for our Mountain Dew sponsorship.
I suppose, like, in terms of sponsored segments, it's about as generic as you can offer. Hey, Mountain Dew, what do you want? I don't know, just give our best WrestleMania moments thing. Put our logo on that.
So this was interesting because I didn't know if this was going to be just the tease of the match and it was going to be ended abruptly, if you'd have some screw job. But no, you got the full match here between these two. They got a ton of time. It started early with Dana interfering, and the referee was warning her. And Banks goes for the bank statement very early, and Charlotte's getting to the rope. There were the double knees off the apron as Banks went to the floor. Charlotte got the advantage, knocked Sasha off the apron to the floor, and hit a running boot, sending Sasha's head crashing into the barricade, which did not look fun. Charlotte then held the title in front of her. Sasha kicks it away, and then Banks does the Eddie Guerrero spot, throwing the title that Dana catches, and the referee thinks that Dana has just hit Sasha, and therefore Dana gets ejected. So Charlotte's in control when they return from the commercial break. Sasha makes her comeback, hits the double knees off the turnbuckle, getting a 2 count. Charlotte then went for a top rope moonsault, landing on her feet, and then they go to the floor, and Banks goes for this suicide dive and nearly dies. This was her paying homage to Lita and Trish Stratus during that Raw match. Or Big E, yes. This was almost a literal suicide dive by Sasha. This looked nuts. Yeah. Anyway, Charlotte then attempted this superplex back in the ring, but instead dropped Sasha on the top rope, and she landed on the floor, and Charlotte hit a moonsault to the floor and nearly completely missed Sasha.
She did land on her feet, though.
She landed on her feet. Yeah. It was fine.
Good. It looked good.
They replayed it, and it was, she was just a bit too much momentum from totally overshooting her.
Let's see you do one. Get up on this basketball net right now.
In the ring, there's a kick from Charlotte, and then the natural selection, but Sasha grabs the bottom rope. There was a figure 4. They traded big slaps in the hold, and then into the figure 8, but Sasha rolls to the rope. Sasha then falls down onto the floor as Sasha's selling her knee. The figure 4 gets blocked, and Charlotte goes for a jackknife cover, but that's turned into the Banks statement, but they're right in the ropes. Then Charlotte gets up, charges at Sasha, who then hits the backstabber and into the Banks statement, and Charlotte taps out, and Sasha wins the title in 16 minutes and 51 seconds.
The win was a surprise to me. I mean, as the match progressed and you could kind of sense that they were going really long, you got the feeling that this was going to be a very significant match for whatever reason. And, by the end of it, I don't know if I would have put the belt on Sasha on this show, but watching the whole match, I really wanted Sasha to win, and I got that, and I felt extremely satisfied with this. I got really emotional for Sasha because I would say all these girls, all these NXT girls, Bayley, Sasha, Becky Lynch, Charlotte, they all show their emotion really well, and their stories of coming up from the Performance Center to getting onto the main roster has been so well documented by the WWE Network, by this whole company, that a moment like this just felt incredibly real and incredibly genuine. And, I felt really happy for her, and just as a fan. And, the match I thought was really good, man. It was I remember a year ago when these girls debuted, how it was sort of a rough start. A lot of the matches we were promised that they'd be really good matches, and we had seen these girls have excellent matches in NXT, but it didn't necessarily match that level on the main roster for whatever reason. But I think that's finally starting to change. I feel like, by and large, people are paying a lot more attention to the women's matches that are taking place right now on the main roster. And this match, I thought, was probably, certainly up to that NXT level, if not, up with the top of that kind of standard. So I think they've come a long way.
I was surprised they did this. Clearly they wanted a really big first show with this new era, and this was a part of it, to the point of rushing the SummerSlam match, which they have been talking about that for months, of this being the direction for SummerSlam. And I could still see them just doing the rematch at SummerSlam. Certainly. I don't think anyone would have an issue with that.
I don't think so. And I really don't hate the idea of rushing this prior to SummerSlam, because I get the idea of wanting to start off kind of this new era with an actual title change. They wanted, they're pushing Balor. Coming out of the show, they're also pushing Sasha, and I think it's important to kind of leave this show feeling like something had actually changed.
Byron interviewed her after the match and said that the new era has the first new champion, and the crowd is chanting, "Yes, and you deserve it." She said it was her dream since she was 10 years old, and this proves she is the best, and calls this the era of change and the era of women's wrestling, and will show everyone each week why she is the boss.
Really good promo at the end from Sasha, too. Exactly what you would kind of expect, from Joe Rogan talking to somebody, talking to Michael Bisping after he had just beat Luke Rockhold. It felt that good.
This was almost as good as Valentina Shevchenko's speech afterwards. I mean, that woman was just so happy that she had won on Saturday night. So 2 big wins for women in combat sports. This Sunday night, it's a special start time at 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time for The Law, live audio wrestling with Jason Agnew and myself, covering the entire week in pro wrestling and mixed martial arts, and we will chat with Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. Tune in at liveaudiowrestling.com. Then we had Braun Strowman, the new look Braun Strowman.
Yeah, what would you call this? What would you call this hair?
I don't know what I'd call it. It's tied back, where
like a man
his
bun.
sides are shaved.
Yeah.
It's not a man bun, but it's like his hair is tied down to like his back. I can't believe how far his hair goes down. It was like he had extensions or something. His hair wasn't that long.
And he didn't have this last night or at Battleground, right?
No,
So
he
this
was
is
just the wild hair.
This is a one-night job.
No, so it looks like he's ditched the Wyatt look somewhat. And his opponent was a guy that I will create an award for at the end of the year. I don't know what the category is, but he wins it.
He needs a permanent spot on the roster, I'd say.
James Ellsworth was Ellsworth every penny they paid him on Monday night, because this was the greatest job guy I can recall since that one guy that we loved that Ryback murdered. Yeah. So Byron interviews him before the match, which I liked.
Yeah.
Basically,
they interviewed him during the entrance.
Yes.
With the music blasting, so nobody in the audience could even hear him.
and
talk.
Byron's question was, "What are you thinking?" And he's stuttering, and he's got this look that I don't care who you are. Daniel Day-Lewis couldn't pull off this facial expression of fear on his face, saying that this is his dream. He didn't know that the opponent was going to be Braun Strowman. He was so great. And then the match began. Strowman grabbed him by the neck and swatted him down to the mat like he was a flea. This is the point where Byron gets back to the announce desk and Cole calls him Anderson Cooper for the great questions he asked James Ellsworth. There was this crazy running splash into the corner by Braun. I couldn't believe the speed he picked up here. And his new finish is a reverse chokeslam.
Yeah, where he picks up the guy from the back.
I don't know how effective that is.
Yeah, I guess you're not really choking somebody. It's almost like a massage.
It's like, and the guys can easily pad his falling. Whatever.
Whatever, man.
He won it in 1:09, and James Ellsworth, I hope he gets signed.
I think he's great. They found the perfect looking dork, and I mean, geez, it's so rare that I feel like on WWE TV we get to see guys like this, and like I said earlier, I'm so happy that especially for these new guys and especially for these giants that they're using jobbers, because I found this so effective. You know, I'm not tuning out because I know the end result, but I'm watching because I want to see a guy beat the crap out of this James Ellsworth. So I thought Strowman with the fresh cut being pushed away from the Wyatts, no mention of that. I think it's a good thing. I thought the gimmick didn't necessarily suit him. I thought he just also kind of blended in with kind of the other big guys. So I think this is a good direction for Braun.
There was a video feature on Roman Reigns and then more with the Golden Truth. They're backstage. They thought they had found a Pokemon, but it was a Pittsburgh Penguins logo on a door, and they kept searching. I thought this was going to pay off in much better fashion than it did, but there was a payoff to it. Big Cass and Enzo came out. They're going to be on Ride Along on Monday. And they also had Enzo wearing this new shirt that looked like right in the style of Roots of Fight that I guess the WWE has discovered their look. And
they've had a bunch of their shirts made in that style.
They had Enzo quote ODB saying, "Oh baby, I like it raw." And then Cass listed off the things he likes raw, such as cookie dough, eggs, egg whites, brownie batter, fish, sushi, which would be the same thing, I would think.
Or does he? Maybe he just likes to eat
raw fish
that's not even sushi.
That could be dangerous.
Yeah.
And then they're interrupted by the Shining Stars, who come out, and they're going to send an invitation to everyone to leave this ugly Steel City and come to Puerto Rico. They all got booed, and then Cass spelled out soft.
The Shining Stars hadn't appeared in months, and so I was this whole time thinking, how are they going to retool this gimmick to make it ready for TV? And
here's your answer.
They didn't come up with anything.
Not how I envisioned them when I drafted them as my irrelevant pick last week. So Enzo and Cass took on the Shining Stars. Epico dropped kick Enzo, and then Primo busting out the chocolate slide, and then went for it again, but this time missed and landed on the floor, allowing Enzo to tag in Cass. He hit the Empire elbow to Primo. Epico made the save and got clotheslined to the floor by Cass. Primo then sent Cass to the floor as the Golden Truth shows up in the ring, searching for the Pokemon. And then Primo was distracted by all of this, and Cass hit the big boot for the win in 1:54.
This is one of those shows where I feel like in 20 years' time, somebody might go back to review it for like retro podcasts, and they'll remember, oh yeah, Pokemon. That was a thing.
How dumb. For more of Wei Ting and myself, you can catch Review a SmackDown each and every Wednesday morning. Simply go to liveaudiowrestling.com or subscribe for free to Live Audio Wrestling on iTunes. Finn Balor walks up to Roman Reigns and wishes him luck backstage, and Balor notes that he's Irish, and they invented luck, and Roman Reigns says, "I'm Samoan. Enough said." It's like, oh God, this was not necessary.
Yeah, I thought it was a little counterproductive. It kind of made Balor seem like a bit of a goof.
Well, they made up for it. Michael Cole is losing his voice at this point, so if you want to go back, this is the time to watch. Finn Balor and Roman Reigns, the main event of Raw on Finn's 35th birthday.
Do you think this was too soon to do this match? A potentially pay-per-view drawing main event?
I mean, they did a lot on this show. I was okay with it because it set up a really big match for SummerSlam that I think has a lot of interest, and there was a lot to discuss coming out of this match and the result. So the match begins with Reigns overpowering Balor, and they were positioning Balor as kind of the underdog. They mentioned at one point right off the bat where he gets thrown, welcome to the big leagues.
Balor, when you look at him standing right next to Reigns, he is clearly undersized. I mean, I'd say Balor looks very much like a cruiserweight. So, yeah.
So Reigns is doing the repeated clotheslines in the corner, missed the drive-by, and then takes a stomp from Balor, and then the running drop kick is hit on the floor as Reigns is sent into the barricade, and they go to break with Cole yelling that Finn's got a chance. Balor then attacks the left knee during the commercial break. Reigns lifts Balor off the mat, slams him down, getting a 2 count, and then Balor gets out of the way of a Superman punch, landing an enziguri in the corner, a drop kick, and then a running kick from the apron. There's a double foot stomp to the back of the neck of Reigns coming off the top. Balor again gets a 2 count. Then he hits a sling blade. He sets up and runs at Reigns into a Superman punch, but Balor kicks out. The crowd was very much behind Balor here, and when he was kicking out of the Superman punch, I think believing that he did have a chance to win this. Reigns then hit a double power bomb, got a 2 count, and then we got that smirk I've missed for all these weeks. We got Roman smiling at him.
Which I think is a great heel smirk.
At this point, it can work for him because they hate it.
He's been using it as a babyface, but I think it's so effective as a heel.
And then Reigns sets up for the spear, but he runs into a sling blade. Balor hits another running drop kick, and then he climbs to the top. He hits the coup de grace, and Finn Balor pins Roman Reigns clean.
Amazing. Yeah. And the internet explodes.
And Roman Reigns is... I'm sorry. This was like, we have lost faith in this guy.
Or at least, as part of this guy's further punishment, we are going to use him to build value into our new prospect, Finn Balor, which I thought they were very effective in doing on this show. I thought this was a great episode of Raw. I mean, they're pushing SmackDown as the show with the fresh direction, but that's totally what Raw felt like today. And, you had a title change. I felt every segment had some significance, from the first one introducing the new title. And
this was the least Raw has dragged. I didn't find anything that dragged on this show, really.
I was also telling you, usually I watch on PVR and I kind of zip through the show in 2.5 hours or 2 hours. This one took me longer because I don't know if they were just simply longer matches and not as many entrances for me to fast forward through, but this one took me 2 hours and 15 minutes to watch. So, and I didn't feel bored. I really enjoyed this edition of Raw.
Afterwards, Tom Phillips interviewed the loser. The winner didn't get any mic time. And Reigns says that he hopes Balor beats Seth Rollins at SummerSlam because he wants to fight Balor again, and he respects that dude.
And I think that was to show you that, Roman is still a babyface here, even though he was very much playing a heel all throughout this entire match. But I believe they're still trying to push Roman Reigns as a babyface.
So I think it's a super loud statement based on the finishes of Battleground and Monday. And apparently this Finn Balor decision, I don't know when it was made, but it was definitely known before Battleground that this was what they were going to do on Raw. And I guess see how far they can go with Balor. And because remember when AJ Styles came in and they did not peg him to be at the level he got to, but he got overwhelming response from the audience. And I think this is very much a test case with Finn Balor to see if that same reaction is replicated. And they made this guy feel like the top star on night one on Raw.
Balor, I would say, has an even greater chance than AJ of succeeding at that high level because at this point, having done a year representing NXT, they kind of see him as their own guy, and I feel like, you know, for them to push this guy up into the main event and probably give him the title, let's be honest here, is a way to promote their own system.
It was also interesting that outside of that little backstage segment we mentioned, he also got this reaction. He didn't have to say a word on this show either. Yeah.
So. I think they're better off too. Like I think he's a decent promo. He's probably not the best. It's certainly not his strongest suit. I feel like, but he looks cool and he wrestles great. And when he comes out with the demon entrance at SummerSlam, I think the crowd will really go nuts.
That wraps it up for us, but we will be doing Review a SmackDown. So tune in Wednesday morning at liveaudiowrestling.com as Wei Ting and I will be in Buffalo watching that show live, and you can tune in for that. For Wei Ting, I'm John Pollock, and we will chat about those DVDs on the podcast, which you can download at liveaudiowrestling.com.